Okay, we are live.
And I'm free,
See now,
free ballin'.
yeah, there we go. Okay. Alright, that looks pretty good.
You want to start it off, Mr. Real Host?
Sure. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to episode number 1 of what will hopefully be called The Casual Observers.
Sure.
That's the best we could come up with, sorry. Anyway, this episode is just about the show, and it's not actually a show per se, just about what we would like the show to be, and also what the show is not. So, my name is Josiah.
I'm Jacob.
Okay, I'm sort of like, well, I can't think of a good comparison for the two of us right now. But, anyway, so let's get into what this show is going to be about. So we're going to be tackling basically big questions, a lot of which don't really have like solid answers to.
Right.
And so, and the purpose of it is not to answer those questions, but just to discuss them and to get them out there. And so every episode we'll both prepare points independently, and then we'll each discuss each of our points that we've prepared independently, and the other person will just kind of respond. And the discussions are just free to evolve into wherever the conversation goes. That's just what we'll talk about. So that's basically how an episode will go.
Yeah, basically the whole idea of the show, though, is to just, like, encourage open-mindedness, because we're going to be talking about a lot of religious ideas, and not just specifically Christian or atheist or whatever, just the whole concept of religion and all that, and keeping open minds when it comes to science and the Bible or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Now, we are Christians, but both of us,
Yeah.
we both grew up in Christian households, and we both attend churches, non-denominational Christian churches, but we're not, we feel like a lot of, not just Christians, but just religious people in general, don't want to talk about these issues because they feel like it's somehow undermining like the validity of their beliefs, or like, you know, if you bring up some kind of big question like does God exist or something like that, which is probably going to be an episode, you know, like it could be offensive and people feel like you're, you know, undermining their beliefs or something like that, but we feel like that's not the case, and talking about these things and discussing them isn't offensive, and people shouldn't be offended by it, and they should be open to talking about it, and that's what we're going to do. But yeah, would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, that's pretty close. But a point I want to make is, like, a lot of times, if you're a Christian or whatever, if you're in church, your pastor will say something, and in your head you'll think, wait a second, that doesn't sound right, or that's not what lines up with, like, what I've read or known from, like, school or whatever. And the point we're trying to stress is that, like, it's okay to think like that, and you shouldn't just, like, close off because you feel oppressed by, like, other people or whatever. Whether it's you feel oppressed by the opposing side of, like, the religious or the non-religious, depending on what you are, or something like that. But one thing to note is we're not experts. We are not theologians. We are not preachers. We are not teachers. We are not trying to convince you of anything that you don't want to believe. It's you take what we say and do what you want with it. The whole point is to keep an open mind about these topics.
Yeah, we're also not going to be like debating each other or anything. And the purpose of this is not to convince you of one side or the other. We're just going to be talking about both sides or all the sides, just depending on what the topic is. And it's basically a discussion. You know, it's just like an open-minded discussion that's going to just evolve on its own, and we're just going to go wherever it takes us based on the knowledge that we both have. And we're not experts, so we're hoping that hopefully if we get people to actually watch the show, hopefully
all two of you.
Yeah, we're hoping that, you know, you as the audience can help us out and talk about issues on either side of, you know, just about things that we missed, or just things to think about, or just add to the discussion that we're going to be having on camera. So
yeah, absolutely. Because we will be discussing things that are very, like,
controversial.
That's the word. Because we'll be discussing things that are very controversial, we want you as the audience to come in and comment. I know there's always jokes about, oh, YouTube comments are so bad or whatever, but it's honestly a fine format. We will read every comment, and if you make some good points or something, we will do a follow-up episode on that topic just to discuss what you have said to us.
Yeah.
Because it's important for us to keep an open mind about what you're saying, just as like, which is the whole purpose of the show. So
Yeah, and I feel like the point of each like episode is for us to just explore all the facets of whatever issue it is we're talking about. So it's not like it's not like we just want to just be as inclusive as possible with these ideas of whatever it is we're talking about. So we're obviously not going to be able to get to every one of those, so hopefully you can help us out at some point and fill us in on stuff that we missed. Anything else?
I don't think so. You want to get to like whatever this meat and potatoes is here?
Sure. I'll probably edit some of this out. Probably edit this discussion out.
No, dude, leave it in. Now that I've said leave it in, you have to leave it
Okay,
in.
fine.
And people are going to see this conversation.
Okay, cool.
Okay, cool. So, I guess we should discuss how, okay, like, have you ever been sitting in church and your pastor says something, or a preacher says something that you just don't agree with, and then, like, you didn't want to question it because people would, like, yell at you or something? Like, has that ever happened to you? Like, I know the church you go to, so I'm gonna
No.
judge you if you say something like that, but...
I've never, no, it's, well, sort of, like, I know what topics would be just, like, too, like, sacred to question,
Mm-hmm.
so I stay away from those, but, like, I have asked, like, something that I felt like isn't too sacred or whatever to ask about, and then I basically, usually the answer is, like, well, we just gotta believe, and that's basically the answer, like, just believe, which that's a legitimate, like, religious answer, I would say. Like,
Is this though?
To just, like, trust God and believe, yeah, sure, why not? But, like, for the purposes of this show, those are the questions that we're just gonna just talk. Those are the questions we're gonna talk about.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the whole purpose of the show is, like, when I used to ask these questions to people, they would not give me good answers. They'd be like, oh, you just believe or whatever. And that's not really acceptable. It's so infuriating when you ask a question, people are like, oh,
Yeah.
you just go with it. You said things are too sacred to ask questions about? Like, what
Well,
would,
I felt like they were.
like, what would be considered too sacred?
Well, I mean, like, okay, like, let's say you are going to a church or something of any religion, and you're monotheistic or polytheistic, you wouldn't go up to your pastor and say, like, hey, why do you think God exists? Or, like, what facts are there for the existence of some kind of deity or something, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, you wouldn't just question that because it's just, like, such a basic tenet of that faith, probably,
Yeah.
that a God exists. Of most religions it is, that a God exists, that, it's just not something that, if you want to be perceived as, like, an adherent or a believer or whatever you want to call yourself, that's not something that you want to just go off and start questioning and tell and have, the people convince you of, because you want to be perceived as an adherent and just basically would,
Right. This isn't like, in a scenario like that, you don't want to be like the edgy teenager and you're like, guys, I don't believe in God anymore.
Yeah.
Or something like that. But, I mean,
or maybe you do want to be that person, who knows?
that's true. Gotta be open-minded.
Yeah.
14-year-old kid right there who's watching, who's not actually watching, because we have 2 viewers. Yeah, we're talking to you, buddy. But, like, asking a question like, does God exist or something, I feel like
In a
that's-
religious setting.
Right.
Yeah.
That doesn't really get you anywhere anyways, though. Because
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll have an episode of, like, does God exist, and we can get into it. But that all really boils down to, like, just, do you believe or do you not, I think.
Yeah, essentially.
Like,
But I think it's okay to have, like, a discussion about, like, just like a logical discussion about, like, hey, here's why, a God could exist, or here's why a God, can exist, or whatever, you know what I mean?
right.
Like, it's okay to have the discussion, you know what I mean? It's okay to talk about the different sides of it, and that's what we want to do on this channel.
Right, and a point I wanted to go through is I was talking to Micah Kennard one time, and he's a vocalist of O Sleeper, for those of you who don't know.
Nobody knows.
Yeah, okay.
Nobody knew that.
Okay, well, I figured I'd inform you. I was talking to him one time, and we were talking about the discussion of, like, being friends with, like, atheists and stuff, and how when you're around these people, there's this idea that, like, there's a conflict between you because they believe different things than you do. And then, so, as a religious person, if you're around all these atheists, they say these things that are, like, really scientific and are really smart, and they make a whole lot of sense, right? And then as a religious person, you might not be taught in church to believe that. But really, all it comes down to, like, something I want to say is, like, science is, like, kind of the basis for everything we have, because if we don't have facts, like, you know, if we're actually going to discuss something, we need facts, and therefore we need science. So if you don't have the science, it all falls apart, basically. So the only difference is, like, both sides should have science. Both sides should, like, look into this stuff, excuse me, and study this stuff. And the only major difference is that, like, look, I believe what science is saying, you're believing what science is saying, but I also just believe that there was a God who created it. And I'm going to follow that book along with the science. I think that's the point I wanted to come across. I don't know.
Okay. Cool. Well, that's, I feel like that's, well, so that's kind of the line of reasoning that we're going to go down in every episode. That's just kind of, this episode is just to kind of get what we want the channel to be about and be like. So that's where we're both going to be kind of coming from, is from, like, that line of thinking with each episode and with each topic that we tackle and talk about. So, yeah. So hopefully you come along this journey with us.
I want to get the point across again that we are not, like, trying to convince you of anything.
Right.
And if you want to listen to the show and be like let's say you're a Christian or whatever, or an atheist, and you want to just, like, sit here and listen to what we're saying and still, like, hold strong to your own beliefs, that's okay. Like, Penn Jillette is a strong believer. Like, we all know he's an atheist. He believes that, like, he likes Christians who will not change their beliefs based on what science says, because the conversation between you two is just like, oh, I'm right, you're wrong, and the other party just says, I'm right, you're wrong. And if that's what you believe, then that's fine, you know? Like, it's totally acceptable for you to do that. So, I mean, you can not waver any ideas at all based on what we say and still just listen to the show.
Yeah, we're not trying to produce any outcome in our viewers, you know, anybody that watches it. Like, we're not trying to get you to do anything or to believe anything differently or strengthen your beliefs even. It's just the conversation, and we're just going to talk about stuff. And so whatever happens to you, or whatever line of thinking that it takes you down or doesn't, that's great, fine. Just watch it, basically.
And discuss with us. This should be a discussion between us and you.
Yeah.
It's not just between me and him.
Yeah, tell us give us your thoughts on it. You know, like, what can you add to this conversation, basically, because we want to get as much out of each topic as we can.
Exactly, because there will be episodes where we bring up, like, really stupid ideas back and forth to each other, and we'll just, like, sit here talking to each other, you know?
Yeah.
And we'll be arguing stupid points that we both think each other's wrong because, you know, but it'll come down to, like, what you guys think, and that will produce the more content, basically.
Yeah.
Because the whole point of being open-minded is to listen to other voices. You guys are what we want to talk to. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Cool.
All right, I think that wraps up our very first episode. Sort of. It's more like an introductory episode, but
Basically.
Anyway, I think that'll do it for us. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.